Hey, it is your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. We got a great viewer question in, and that is really to discuss and look at examples of emotional abuse, emotional neglect. What are some examples? What are some settings? What are some situations where this can occur? And the first experience gives me the thought of, child raising. When you have parents, when you have adults, the mature individual, the expert, the caregiver of the family, then has a child, a young boy, a young girl, an infant, a toddler, entering the childhood development stages, a parent who does not have communication or nurturing and attention and acknowledgement and validation of that child. It really becomes abusive when it's chronic and it is neglectful in nature and not meeting their developmental needs in that situation. And so if we think of that as just sort of a paradigm, and we look into then the needs as an individual goes through young childhood, through their teenage years, their young childhood years, young adulthood, middle adulthood, and furthermore, there are developmental stages that need to be met. And when those are not met, either by the caregiver, in other words, instilled, the individual then has a very difficult time satisfying or moving through these developmental stages independently, autonomously. They don't know how to then kind of parent themselves, direct themselves, understand their feelings, have themselves be productive, either in relationships or jobs, or in society as a whole. They tend to become developmentally challenged or really sort of stifled or stuck in these developmental stages where they're not moving through these stages. They are delayed. They have a delay of that growth, and so you might see an adult who is very immature, who needs to progress through those stages because their emotional needs were not met. And what are some examples of emotional needs? To be listened to, and that means active listening to, not just while someone is talking and the person is just doing dishes or cleaning the house, just really not giving them eye attention or eye contact rather, physical attention as well, where their body is then, maybe facing that child. So it can be very perceived by that child to be abusive if they are not listened to, they are not attended to, they are not validated, or and the opposite, they are invalidated or hurt or shamed for their feelings, their actions, their behaviors, their thoughts, opinions, things of that nature, where they're then scolded obsessively, compulsively, or chronically, told that their feelings don't matter, told negative comments that they're stupid, they're ugly, there's something wrong with them physically, your skin color, the color of your hair, the texture of your hair, your body shape, your body size, we're, essentially children, who really, are the way that they are in their God-given form, are insulted for that and made to feel bad about that, made to feel shamed, and then, carry this around with them and feeling inadequate. And then that can create, the low self-esteem and then the rebelliousness against the family because their needs are not met. They are not validated or valued for who they are. Perhaps they were left, alone for a long period of time where they were not played with, they were not held, they were not touched, they were not shown really how to dress themselves appropriately. They weren't taught about, eating well or defecating, how to handle these things. There are a lot of other emotional abuses, if they're around a lot of abusive language. So a lot of hostility, yelling in the family, slamming of doors, throwing of objects, people storming out, people storming in, the parents leaving them unattended. These can be emotionally abusive where there's then instilled in them a fear, a chronic feeling of fear, or fight or flight, or feeling like there's an abuser around who is not kind, and, then keeps them on this sort of edge emotionally where the child feels chronically afraid and in the fight or flight. And then so therefore the Stockholm syndrome, where then they're identifying with the abuser and having to do whatever, they then begin to attach to the abuse and then doing whatever they need to prevent these outbursts. So they're trying to become overly attached with these people, so that they don't have an outburst, so that they don't become angry, because these people are basically keeping the the lights, the shelter, the peace in their environment. So they then become overly attached, and then the emotions of the caregiver become more important than the emotions of themselves. So they begin to kind of shut down emotionally. Their I am begins to be the you am, and the emotions of their abuser then becomes more important. So caregiving of the adult, we see that where the child then has to take care of the parent. They are brushing their hair, they're giving them foot massages, when they're 6, 7, 8, 9, they're the ones giving all the affection, not just as a love, two-way relationship, but where the parent is not giving that to the child. The parent wants the child to give that to them, because they're so stressed out, they're needing attention, and they're not getting it from our spouse or healthy adult relationship. So, we then see, child cooking for the parents, or, having to do a lot of, house cleaning when they're really very young, raking when they're 6, vacuuming when they're 6, 7, 8, rather than playing, trying to do the dusting rather than their homework. They're not able to live their own life. So this is kind of like an emotional, hurtful situation to the child, because they become stuck in that, and then, taking care of the adult, and they're not really given the experience of being able to live their own life freely without fear. They then develop a shame about what's going on at home, and they can't bring friends over. They're embarrassed because of the way that this parent is treating them. And so, they don't want to get yelled at in front of their friends. They don't want to get scolded in front of their friends. They don't want to see see what's behind the locked door, so to speak. So they're always going to try to play outside or go over to their other friend's house, or just escape or run away. That's when we have the teenagers wanting to run away, or being very rebellious, or the self-harming behaviors, because they're now acting out the way that they were treated. So if they were yelled at, inattended to, then that child then acts that out in turn. So then they begin the self-injury behavior, the self-damnation behavior. We see the kids who are very rebellious or become violent. They're acting out what was done to them oftentimes. Sometimes these kids, could have had, wonderful upbringings. That's not in every case, but those are some situations where you might have, emotional abuse. And then, of course, similar in adult relationships where, there's a lot of yelling, a lot of name calling, a lot of belittling. Yes, every couple has their arguments, but when it really goes out of control, and then, the reactions are, through the roof, for little petty things, which, you might have a bickering about, but eventually, it's like two stones that eventually have an edge that they kind of grind, together and then begin to work together. So there is always some emotional play at hand, but it becomes abusive when someone is outright, chronically around or exposed to this negative information, negative body language, negative emotional language, verbal chastising, if you will, and really sort of that individual is that no longer to evolve through the developmental stages, that they're kind of held back on that emotional level, and then they develop, emotional disabilities, if you will, or a lack of emotional intelligence, and become kind of ruminating at that stage. There is help for people, especially as the tools that we discuss here in the channel. It's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today, and I hope that these videos, that they do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.